The demons. Before Kaku. How Goris the king, albeit so strong a sorcerer, elected that by the sword, and chiefly by the lord current his captain. Nineral. Should be determined as for this time the event of these high matters, and how those twain, the king and the lord, just spake face to face at last, and of the bloody battle before Kartu, and what fruit was garnered there, and what made ripe against harvest. Goris the king sate in his chamber, the 13th morning after these tidings brought to Karka. On the table under his hand were papers of account and schedules of his armies and their equipment. Corund sate at the king's right hand, and over against him Corinius. Corund's great hairy hands were clasped before him on the table. He spoke without book, resting his gaze on the steady clouds that sailed across the square of sky seen through the high window that faced him. Of which land and the home provinces, O king, naught but good. All the companies of soldiers which were appointed to repair to this part by the 10th of the month are now come hither, save some bands of spearmen from the south, and some from Estrigansia. These last I expect today. Viglus writeth, they come with him with the heavy troops from Bautry I sent him to assemble. So is the muster full. As for these parts, Thamna, Zorn, Permio, the land of Ar, Trace, Butany, and Estramarine. Of the subject allies, there's less good there. The kings of Minia and Gilter, Olis of Tekapan, County Escobrine of Zusha, the king of Elien, all be here with their contingents. But there's mightier names we miss. Duke Maxtlin of Azumel hath flung off's allegiance and cut off your envoy's ears, O king. 'Tis thought for some supposed light part of the sons of Corsus, done to his sister. That docketh us 30 stout fighters. The lord of Ushland sendeth no answer, and now are we advertised by Minia and Gilter of his open malice and treason. Who did stubbornly let them the way hither through his country, while they hastened to do your majesty's commands? Then there's the Ogedian levies, should be nigh 1,000 spears, 10 days overdue. Hemming, that raiseth Pixiland in Presmira's name, will bring them in if he may. Who also hath order, being on his way, to rouse Mautrani to action, from whom no word as yet, and I do fear treachery in 'em. Mautrani and Ogedia both, they have been so long of coming. King Barsht of Teribia sendeth flat refusal. It is known to you besides, O king, said Corinius, that the king of Nevria came in last night, many days past the day appointed, and but half his just compliment. The king drew back his lips. I will not dash his spirits by blaming him at this present. Later I'll have that king's head for this. This is the sum, said Corund. Nay, then, I had forgot the red folioed with folk. 300 perchance came in this morning. Corinius thrust out his tongue and laughed. One hen lobster such as he shall scarce afford a course for this banquet. He keepeth faith, said Corund, where bigger men turn dastards. 'Tis seen now that these forced leagues be as sure as they were sealed with butter. Your majesty will doubtless give him audience. The king was silent a while, studying his papers. What strength today in Karka? He asked. Corund answered him. As near as may be, 200 foot and 50 horse, 5,000 in all. And, that I weigh most, O king, big, broad, strong-set lads of Witchland, nigh every jack of 'em. The king said, 'Twas not well done, O Corund, to bid thy son delay for Ogedia and Mautranini. He might else have been in Karka now with 1,000 Pixie-landers to swell our strength. I did that, I did, answered Corund, seeking only your good, O king. A few days' delay might buy us 1,000 spears. Delay, said the king, hath favoured mine enemy. This we should have done. At his first landing, give him no time but wink, set on him with all our forces, and throw him into the sea. "If luck go with us, that may yet be," said Corund. The king's nostrils widened. He crouched forward, glaring at Corund and Corinius, his jaw thrust out so that the stiff black beard on it brushed the papers on the table before him. "The demons," said he, "landed I the night at Ralpa. They come on with great journeys northward, will be here ere 3 days be spent." Both they grew red as blood. Corund spake, "Who told you these tidings, O king?" "Care not thou for that," said the king. "Enough for thee, I know it. Hath it done you napping?" "No," answered he. "These 10 days past we have been ready, with what strength we might make, to receive him, come they from what quarter they will. So it is, though, that while we lack the Pixie land succours, Just hath by some odds the advantage over us. If, as our intelligence saith, 6,000 fighting men do follow him, and these forced besides with some that should be ours." "Thou wouldst," said the king, "await these out of Pixie land, with what else Hemming may gather, afore we offer them battle?" Said Corund, "That would I. We must look beyond the next turn of the road, O my lord the king." "That would not I," said Corinius. "That is stoutly said, Corinius," said the king. "Yet remember, thou hadst the greater force on Crothering's side, yet wast overborne." "'Tis that standeth in my mind, lord," said Corund. "For well I know, had I been there, I'd have fared no better." The lord Corinius, whose brow had darkened with the naming of his defeat, looked cheerfully now and said, "I pray you, but consider, O my lord the king, that here at home is no room for such a sleight or gin as that whereby in their own country they took me. When Juss and Brandock Daha and their stinking Gaberlunzies do cry, huff at us on Witchland soil, 'tis time to give 'em a choke pear. Which with your leave, lord, I will promise now to do, other else to lose my life." "Give me thy hand," said Corund. "Of all men else would I ha' chosen thee for such a day as this, and were today to meet the whole power of Demonland in arms, to stand perdue with thee for this bloody service. But let us hear the king's commands, which way soe'er he choose, we shall do it right gladly." Garis the king sat silent. One lean hand rested on the iron serpent head of his chair's arm. The other, with finger outstretched against the jutting cheekbone, supported his chin. Only in the deep shadow of his eye sockets a lambent light moved. At length he started, as if the spirit, flown to some unsounded gulfs of time or space, had in that instant returned to its mortal dwelling. He gathered the papers in a heap and tossed them to Corund. "Too much lieth on it," said he. "He that hath many peas may put more in the pot. But now the day approacheth when I and Juss must cast up our account together, and one or all shall be brought to death and bane." He stood up from his chair and looked down on those two, his chosen captains, great men of war raised up by him to be kings over 2/4 of the world. They watched him like little birds under the eye of a snake. "The country hereabout," said the king, "is not good for horsemanship, and the demons be great horsemen. Khaki is strong, and never can it be forced by assault. Also under mine eye should my men of Witchland acquit themselves to do the greatest deeds. Therefore will we abide them here in Karkaa, until young Hemming come, and his levies out of Pixie land. Then shall ye fall upon them, and never make an end, till the land be utterly purged of them, and all the lords of Demonland be slain." Corinius said, "To hear is to obey, O king. Howsoever, not to dissemble with you, I'd lever at 'em at once, stead of let them sit a while and refresh their army. Occasion is a wanton wench, O king, that is quick to beckon another man, if one look coldly on her. Moreover, lord, could you not, by your art in small time with certain compositions? But the king brake in upon him, saying, Thou knowest not what thou speakest. There is thy sword, there thy men, these my commands. See thou perform them punctually when time shall come. Lord, said Gorinius, you shall not find me wanting. Therewith he did obeisance, and went forth from before the king. The king said unto Corund, Thou hast manned him well, this tassel, gentle. There was some danger he should so mislike subjection unto thee in these acts, martial as it should breed, some quarrel should little speed our enterprise. Think not you that, O king, answered Corund. 'Tis grown like an almanac for the past year, past date. A will feed out of my hand now. Because thou hast carried it with him, said the king, in so honourable and open plainness. Hold on the road thou hast begun, and be mindful still that into thine hand is given the sword of Witchland, and therein have I put my trust for this great hour. Corund looked upon the king with grey and quick eyes, shining like unto the eagle's. He slapped his heavy sword with the flat of his hand. "'Tis a tough fox, O my lord the king, will not fail his master." Therewith, glad at the king's gracious words, he did obeisance unto the king, and went forth from the chamber. The same night there appeared in the sky, impending over Carca, a blazing star with two bushes. Corund beheld it in an open space betwixt the clouds as he went to his chamber. He said naught of it to his lady wife, lest it should trouble her. But she too had from her window seen that star, yet spake not of it to her lord for a like reason. And King Gorais, sitting in his chamber with his baleful books, beheld that star and its fiery streamers, which the king rather noted than liked. For albeit he might not know of a certain what way that sign intended, yet was it apparent to one so deeply learned in nigromancy and secrets astronomical, that this thing was fatal, being of those prodigies and ominous prognostics which forerun the tragical ends of noble persons and the ruins of states. The third day following, watchmen beheld from Carcier walls in the pale morning the armies of the demons that filled the whole plain to southward, but of the succours out of Pixieland was as yet no sign at all. Goris the king, according as he had determined, held all his power quiet within the fortress. But for passing of the time, and because it pleased his mind to speak yet face to face with the Lord Jus before this last mortal trial in arms should be begun, betwixt them, the king sent Cadarus as his herald with flags of truce and olive branches into the demons' lines, by which mission it was concluded that the demons should withdraw their armies 3 bowshots from the walls, and they of Witchland should abide all within the hold. Only the king with 14 of his folk unarmed, and Jus with a like number unarmed, should come forth into the midst of the bateable ground, and there speak together. And this meeting must be at the 3rd hour after noon. So either party came to this parley at the hour appointed. Jus went bareheaded, but save for that, all armed in his shining byrnie with gorget and shoulder plates, damasked and embossed with wires of gold, and golden leg harness, and rings of red gold upon his wrists. His kirtle was of wine-dark silken tissue, and he wore that dusky cloak the sylphs had made for him, the collar whereof was stiff with broidery, and strange beasts worked thereon in silver thread. According to the compact, he bare no weapon, only in his hand a short ivory staff inlaid with precious stones, and the head of it a ball of that stone which men call Belus's eye, that is white, and hath within it a black apple, the midst whereof a man shall see to glitter like gold. Very masterful and proud he stood before the king, carrying his head like a stag that sniffs the morning. His brethren and Brandog Dahar remained a pace or two behind him, with King Gazlark and the lords Zig and Grow, and Mochar, and Tharmrod, and Sturkmir, Quoz with his 2 sons, and Astar, and Bremery of Shores, goodly men and lordly to look on, unweaponed all, and wondrous was the sparkle of their jewels that were on them. Over against them, attending on the king, were these, Corund king of Impland, and Corinius called king of Demonland, Hakmon, and Viglus Corun's sons, Duke Corsus and his sons, Decalagus and Gorius, Ulien king of Minia, Olis lord of Tecapan, Duke Avel of Estrigansia, the Red Foliot, Erp the king of Elien, and the counts of Thramna and Susha, unweaponed but armoured to the throat, big men and strong, the most of them and of lordly bearing, yet none to match with Corinius and Corund. The king, in his mantle of cobra skins, his staff royal in his hand, topped by half a head, all those tall men about him, friend and foe alike. Lean and black, he towered amongst them like a thunder-blasted pine tree seen against the sunset. So, in the golden autumn afternoon, in the midst of that sad main of sedge lands where between slimy banks the weed-choked Druima deviously winds toward the sea, were those 2 men met together for whose ambition and their pride the world was too little a place to contain them both, and peace lying between them, and like some drowsy dragon of the elder slime, squat, sinister, and monstrous, the citadel of Karka slept over all. By and by the king spake and said, I sent for thee because I think it good. I and thou should talk together, while yet is time for talking. Jus answered, I quarrel not with that, O king. Thou, said the king, bending his brow upon him, art a man wise and fearless. I counsel thee, and all these that be with thee, turn back from Karka. Well, I see the blood thou didst drink in Melikafkas will not allay thy thirst, and war is to thee thy pearl and thy paramour. Yet, if it be, turn back from Karka. Thou standest now on the pinnacle of thine ambition, wilt leap higher, thou fall'st in the abyss. Let the 4 corners of the earth be shaken with our wars, but not this centre. For here shall no man gather fruit. But, and if it be death he gather, or if then this fruit only, that zoacum, that fruit of bitterness, which when he shall have tasted of, all the bright lights of heaven shall become as darkness, and all earth's goodness as ashes in his mouth, all his light days, until he die. He paused. The Lord Jus stood still, quailing not at all beneath that dreadful gaze. His company behind him stirred and whispered, Lord, Brando, da, with mockery in his eye, said somewhat to Goldry Blusco under his breath. But the king spake again to the Lord Jus, Be not deceived, these things I say unto thee, not as labouring to scare you from your set purpose with frights and fairy babes. I know your quality too well. But I have read signs in heaven, naught clear, but threatful unto both you and me. For thy good, I say it, O Jus, and again. For that our last speech leaveth the firmest print, be advised, turn back from Karka, or it be too late. Lord Jus hearkened attentively to the words of Goris the king, and when he had ended, answered and said, O king, thou hast given us terrible good counsel. But it was riddle-wise, and hearing thee, mine eye was still on the crown thou wearest, made in the figure of a crab-fish, which, because it looks one way and goes another, methought did fitly pattern out thy looking to our perils, but seeking the while thine own advantage. The king gave him an ill look, saying, I am thy lord paramount. With subjects it sits not to use this familiar style unto their king. Jus answered, Thou dost thee and thou me, and indeed it were folly in either of us twain to bend knee to t'other. when the lordship of all the earth waiteth on the victor in our great contention. Thou hast been open with me, Witchland, to let me know thou art uneager to strike a field with us. I will be open too, and I will make an offer unto thee, and this it is, that we will depart out of thy country and do no more unpeaceful deeds against thee, till thou provoke us again, and thou, of thy part, of all the land of Demonland, shalt give up thy quarrel, and of Pixie land and Impland beside, and shalt yield me up, Corsus and Corinius thy servants, that I may punish them for the beastly deeds they did in our land, whenas we were not there to guard it. He ceased, and for a minute they beheld each other in silence. Then the king lifted up his chin and smiled a dreadful smile. Corinius whispered mockingly in his ear, Lord, you may lightly give 'em courses. That were easy composition, and false coin too, methinks. Stand back, I thy place, said the king, and hold thy peace. And unto Lord Jus he said, Of all ensuing harm, the cause is in thee. For I am now resolved never to put up my sword until of thy bleeding head I may make a football. And now let the earth be afraid, and Cynthia obscure her shine, no more words but mum. Thunder and blood and night must usurp our parts to complete and make up the catastrophe of this great peace. That night the king waked late in his chamber in the Iron Tower alone. These 3 years past he had seldom resorted thither, and then commonly but to bear away some or other of his books to study in his own lodging, his jars and flasks and bottles of blue and green and purple glass, wherein he kept his cursed drugs and electuaries of secret composition, his athels and athanors, his crucibles, his horse-bellied retorts and alembics and banes, marries, stood arrow on shelves coated with dust, and hung about with the dull spider's weavings. The furnace was cold. The glass of the windows was clouded with dirt. The walls were mildewed, the air of the chamber fusty and stagnant. The king was deep in his contemplation, with a big black book open before him on the 6-sided reading stand, the damnablest of all his books, the same which had taught him aforetime what he must do, when by the wicked power of enchantment he had wanted but a little to have confounded Demonland and all the lords thereof in death and ruin. The open page under his hand was of parchment discoloured with age, and the writing on the page was in characters of ancient, out-of-fashion crabbedness, heavy and black, and the great initial letters and the illuminated borders were painted and gilded in dark and fiery hues, with representations of dreadful faces and forms of serpents and toad-faced men and apes, and manticores and succubi and incubi and obscene representations and figures of unlawful meaning. These were the words of the writing on the page, which the king conned over and over, falling again into a deep study between whiles, and then conning these words again of an age-old prophetic writing touching the preordinate destinies of the royal house of Goris in Karka. So shall your house stand and be unto eternity. Yet walk wachily, wittinge full sartinly, that if impiously the second time in the body practising a clamavi, one of ye catch should be by the faintest subtilty, and his life lost be. Broke is then this Siri, dampened are you then eternally, yeth shouldest thou then ne nevermore, say scarcely the gods mote rescue ye out of the helly where you will lie, unto eternity, the stellesti eldecit me. Goris the king stood up and went to the south window. The casement bolts were rusted. He forced them, and they flew back with a shriek and a clatter and a thin shower of dust and grit. He opened the window and looked out. The heavy night grew to her depth of quiet. There were lights far out in the marshes, the lights of Lord Jus's campfires of his armies gathered against Karka. Scarcely without a chill might a man have looked upon that king standing by the window, for there was in the tall lean frame of him an iron aspect as of no natural flesh and blood, but some harder, colder element, and his countenance, like the picture of some dark divinity graven ages ago by men long dead, bore the imprint of those old qualities of unrelenting power, scorn, violence, and oppression, ancient as night herself, yet untouched by age. Young as each night when it shuts down, and old and elemental as the primeval dark. A long while he stood there, then came again to his book. Greece the seventh, he said in himself, that was once in the body. And I have done better than that, but not yet well enough. 'Tis too hazardous the second time, alone. Corund is a man undaunted in war, but the man is too superstitious, and quaketh at that which hath not flesh and blood. Apparitions and urchin shows can quite unman him. There's Corineus, careth not for God or man a point. But he is too rash and unadvised. I were mad to trust him in it. Were the goblin here, it might be carried. Damnable both sides villain, he's cast off from me. He scanned the page as if his piercing eyes would thrust beyond the barriers of time and death and discover some new meaning in the words which should agree better with the thing his mind desired, while his judgment forbade it. He says, damned eternally. He says that breaketh the series, and earth shouldst thou then never more see. Put him by. And the king slowly shut up his book and locked it with 3 padlocks, and put back the key in his bosom. The need is not yet, he said. The sword shall have his day, and Corund. But if that fail me, then even this shall not turn me back, but I will do. That I will do. In the same hour, when the king was but now entered again into his own lodgings, came through a runner of Hemmings, to let them know that he, 1,500 strong, marched down the way of kings from Pixieland. Moreover, they were advertised that the demon fleet lay in the river that night, and it was not unlike the attack should be in the morning, by land and water. All night the king sate in his chamber holding counsel with his generals, and ordering all things for the morrow. All night long he closed, not his eyes an instant, but the others. He made sleep by turns, because they should be brisk and ready for the battle. For this was their counsel, to draw out their whole army on the left bank before the bridge gate, and there offer battle to the demons at point of day. For if they should abide within doors, and suffer the demons to cut young Hemming off from the bridge gate, then were he lost, and if the bridge house should fall, and the bridge, then might the demons lightly ship what force they pleased to the right bank, and so closely invest them in khaki. Of an attack on the right bank they had no fear, well knowing themselves able to sit within doors and laugh at them, since the walls were there inexpugnable. But if a battle were now brought about before the bridge gate, as they were minded, and Hemming should join in the fight from the eastward, there was good hope that they should be able to crumple up the battle of the demons, driving them in upon their centre from the west, whilst Hemming smote them on the other part, whereby these should be cast into a great rout and confusion, and not be able to escape away to their ships, but there in the fenlands before khaki should be made a prey unto the witches. When it was the cold last hour before the dawn, the generals took from the king their latest commands ere they drew forth their armies. Corineus came forth first from the king's chamber a little while before the rest. In the draughty corridor the lamps swung and smoked, making an uncertain windy light. Corineus espied by the stairhead the Lady Sriva standing, whether watching to bid her father adieu, or but following idle curiosity. Whichever it were, not a fico gave he for that, but coming swiftly upon her, whisked her aside into an alcove where the light was barely enough to let him see the pale shimmer of her silken gown, dark hair pinned loosely up in deep snaky coils, and dark eyes shining. My witty false one, have I caught thee? Nay, fight not, thy breath smells like cinnamon. Kiss me, Shriva. I'll not, said she, striving to escape. Naughty man, am I used thus? But finding she got naught by struggling, she said in a low voice, Well, if thou bring back demon land tonight, then let's hold more chat. Hearken to the naughty traitress, said he, that but last night didst do me some uncivil discourtesies, and now speaketh me fair. And what a devil for, if not cause her seemeth I'll likely not come back after this day's fight. But I'll come back, Mistress Kiss, and be gone. Ay, by the gods, and I'll have my payment too. His lips fed deep on her lips, his strong and greedy hands softly mastered her against her will, till, with a little smothered cry, she embraced him, bruising her tender body against the armour he was girt withal. Between the kisses she whispered, Yes, yes, tonight. Surely he damned spiteful fortune that sent him not this encounter, but an half-hour sooner. When he was departed, Shriva remained in the shadow of the alcove to set in order her hair and apparel, not a little disarrayed in that hot wooing, out of which darkness she had convenience to observe the leave-taking of Presmyra and her lord as they came down that windy corridor and paused at the head of the stairs. Presmyra had her arm in his. "I know where the devil keepeth his tail, madam," said Corund, "and I know a very traitor when I see him." "When didst thou ever yet fare ill by following of my counsel, my lord?" said Presmyra. "Or did I refuse thee ever anything thou didst require me of? These 7 years since I put off my maiden zone for thee, and 20 kings sought me in sweet marriage, but thee I preferred before them all. Seeing the falcon shall not mate with popinjays, nor the she-eagle with swans and bustards. And will you say nay to me in this?" She stood round to face him. The pupils of her great eyes were large in the doubtful lamplight, swallowing their green fires in deep pools of mystery and darkness. The rich and gorgeous ornaments of her crown and girdle seemed but a poor casket for that matchless beauty which was hers. Her face, where every noble and sweet quality, and everything desirable of earth or heaven, had framed each feature to itself. The glory of her hair, like the red sun's glory, her whole body's poise and posture, like a stately bird's new lighted after flight. "Though it be very rhubarb to me," said Corund, "shall I say nay to thee this tide?" "Not this tide, my queen." "Thanks, dear my lord. Disarm him and bring him in, if you may. The king shall not refuse us this to pardon his folly, when thou shalt have obtained this victory for him upon our enemies." The Lady Shriva might hear no more. Hearkened she never so curiously. But when they were now come to the stair-foot, Corund paused a minute to try the buckles of his harness. His brow was clouded. At length he spake. "This shall be a battle mortal, fierce and doubtous for both parties. 'Gainst such mighty opposites as here we have, 'tis possible, no more. But kiss me, dear lass. And if, tush, 'twill not be, and yet I'd not leave it unsaid. If ill tide ill, I'd not have thee waste all thy days a-grieving. Thou knowest I am not one of your sour envious jacks. Bear so poor a conceit of themselves, they begrudge their wives should wed again, lest the next husband should prove the better man." But Presmyra came near to him with good and merry countenance. "Let me stop thy mouth, my lord. These be foolish thoughts for a great king going into battle. Come back in triumph, and I the mean season. Think on me that wait for thee as a star waits, dear my lord, and never doubt the issue." "The issue," answered he, "I'll tell thee when 'tis done. I'm no astronomer. I'll hew with my sword, love, spoil some of their guesses if I may." "Good fortune and my love go with thee," she said. "Shriva, coming forth from her hiding, hastened to her mother's lodging, and there found her that had just bid adieu to her 2 sons, her face all blubbered with tears. In the same instant came the Duke her husband to change his sword, and the Lady Zenambria caught him about the neck and would have kissed him. But he shook her off, crying out that he was weary of her and her slobbering mouth, menacing her besides with filthy imprecations, that he would drag her with him and cast her to the demons who, since they had a strong loathing for such ugly tits and stale old trots, would no doubt hang her up or disembowel her, and so rid him of his lasting consumption. Therewith he went forth hastily. But his wife and daughter, either weeping upon other, came down into the court, meaning to go up to the tower above the water-gate, to see the army marshalled beyond the river. And on the way Shriva related all she had heard said betwixt Corund and Presmyra. In the court they met with Presmyra's self, and she, going with blithe countenance and light tread, and humming a merry tune, bade them good morrow. "You can bear these things more bravelier than we, madam," said Zenambria. "We be too gentle-hearted, methinks, and pitiful." Presmyra replied upon her, "'Tis true, madam, I have not the weak sense of some of you soft-eyed, whimpering ladies, and by your leave I'll keep my tears, which be great spoilers of the cheeks beside, until I need 'em." When they were passed by, "Is it not a stony-livered and a shameless hussy, O my mother?" said Shriva. "And is it not scandalous, her laughing and jesting as I have told it thee?" When she did bid him adieu, devising only how best she might coax him to save the life of yonder chambering traitorous hound. "With whom?" said Zenambria. "She wont to do the thing. I'd think shame to speak on. Truly, this foreign madam with her loose and wanton ways doth scandal the whole land for us." But Presmyra went her way, glad that she had not by an eyelid's flicker let her lord guess what a dread possessed her mind, who had in all the bitter night seen strange and cruel visions, portending loss and ruin of all she held dear. Now, when dawn appeared, was the king's whole army drawn out in battle array before the bridge-house. Corineus held command on the left. There followed him 1,500 chosen troops of Witchland, with the dukes of Trace and Estragansia, besides these kings and princes with their outlandish levies, the king of Minia, Count Escobrine of Suchat, and the Red Folio. Corsus led the centre, and with him went King Erp of Elion, and his green-coated sling-casters, the king of Nevria, Axticus, lord of Permio, the king of Gilta, Olis of Tekapan, and other captains, 1,700 men in all. The right the Lord Corund had chosen for himself. 2,000 Witchland troops, the likeliest and best, hardened to war in Impland and Demonland and the southeastern borders, followed his standard, beside the heavy spearmen of Baltary and swordsmen of Butany and Ar. Viglus, his son, was there, and the Count of Thramnor, Cadarus, Didarus of Lagos, and the Lord of Estramarine. But when the demons were ware of that great army standing before the bridge-gate, they put themselves in array for battle, and their ships made ready to move up the river under Kaka, if by any means they might attack the bridge by water, and so cut off for the witches their way of retreat. It was bright, low sunshine, and the splendor of the jewelled armor of the demons, and their many-colored kirtles, and the plumes that were in their helms, was a wonder to behold. This was the order of their battle. On their left, nearest the river, was a great company of horse, and the Lord Branduch Daha, to lead them on a great golden dun with fiery eyes. His island men, Melchar and Tharmrod, with Camerar of Stropodon and Sturkmir and Stipmar, were the chief captains that rode with him to that battle. Next to these came the heavy troops from the east, and the Lord Jas himself their leader, on a tall, fierce, big-boned chestnut. About him was his picked bodyguard of horse, with Bremery of Shores their captain. And in his battle were these chiefs, besides Astar of Retre and Gismore, Gleam of Justdale and Peridor of Sul. Lord Spitfire led the centre, and with him Fendor of Shalgreth and Emeron, and the men of Dalney, great spearmen, also the Duke of Azumel, sometime allied with Witchland. There went also with him the Lord Grow, that scanned still those ancient walls with a heavy heart, thinking on the great king within, and with what mastery of intellect and will he ruled those dark, turbulent, and bloody men who bear sway under him, thinking on Queen Presmyra. To his sick imagining, the blackness of Carca, which no bright morning light might lighten, seemed not as of old, the image and emblem of the royal house of Witchland and their high magnificency and power on earth, but rather the shadow thrown before of destiny and death, ready to put down that power for ever, which whether it should so befall or no, he did not greatly care, being aweary of life and life's fevers, wild longings, and exorbitant affects, whereof he thought he had now learned thus much, that to him, who, as it seemed, must still adhere to his own foes, abandoning the other's service, fortune through whatever chop could bring no peace at last. On the demon right, the Lord Goldry Blasco streamed his standard, leading to battle the South Furthers, and the heavy spearmen of Marderdale and Throwater. With him was King Gaslark and his army of Goblinland, and levies from Ogidir and Eustlan, lately revolted from their allegiance to King Goris. The Lord Zig, with his light horse of Ramerick and Kellierland and the northern dales, covered their flank to the eastward. Goris the king beheld these dispositions from his tower above the Watergate. He beheld, besides, a thing the demons might not see from below, for a little swelling of the ground that cut off their view, the marching of men far away along the way of kings from the eastward, young Hemming with the vassalry of Pixieland and Maltrani. He sent a trusty man to apprise Corund of it. Now Lord Juss let blow up the battle call, and with the loud braying of the trumpets, the hosts of the demons swung forth to battle. And the clash of those armies when they met before Carca was like the bursting of a thundercloud, but like a great sea-cliff patient for ages under the storm wind's furies, that not one night's loud wind and charging breakers can wear away, nor yet 1,000,000 nights. The embattled strength of Witchland met their onset, mixed with them, flung them back, and stood unremoved. Corran's iron battalions bear in this first brunt the heaviest load, and bear it through. For the ships, with young Hesper Golthring in command, most fiercely urging them, ran up the river to force the bridge, and Corrand, whiles he met on his front, the onset of the flower of Demonland, must still be shot at by these behind. Hakmon and Vidrus, those young princes his sons, were charged with the warding of the bridge and walls to burn and break up their ships. And they of all hands, bestirring them twice and thrice, threw back the demons, when they had gotten a footing on the bridge, until, in fine, both sides for a long space, fighting very cruelly, it fell out very fatally against Hesper and his power. His ships all lighted in a low, and the more part of his folk burned or drowned or slain with the sword. And himself, after many and grievous wounds in his last attempt, left alone on the bridge, and crawling to have got away, was stabbed in with a dagger, and died. After this, the ships fell back down the river, so many as might avail thereto, and those sons of Corund, their task manfully fulfilled, came forth with their folk to join in the main battle. And the smoke of the burning ships was like incense in the nostrils of the king, watching these things from his tower above the Watergate. Little pause was there betwixt this first brunt and the next, for Hemming now bare down from the east, drave in Zig's horsemen that were hampered in the heavy ground, and pressed his onset home on the demon right. Along the whole line from Corin's post beside the river to the eastern flank, where Hemming joined Corineus the witches, now set on most fiercely, and now were the odds of numbers, which were at first against them, swung mightily in their favour, and under this great side blow on his flank, not all the Lord Goldry Blusco's soldiership, nor all the terror of his might in arms, could uphold the demon's battle line. Yard by yard they fell back before the witches, most gloriously maintaining their array unbroken, though the outland allies broke and fled. Meantime, on the demon left, Jus and Brandoch Daha most stubbornly withstood that onslaught, albeit they had to do with the first and chosen troops of Witchland, in which struggle befell the most bloody fighting that was yet seen that day, and the star of battle so asper and so mortal that it was hard to see how any man should come out from it with life, since not a man of either side would budge an inch, but die there in his steps, if he might not rather slay the foe before him. So the army swayed for an hour, like wrestlers locked. But in the end, the Lord Corrand had his way and held his ground before the bridge gate. Romanard of Dalney, galloping to Lord Jus, where he paused a while panting from the violence of the battle, brought him, by Spitfire's command, tidings from the right, telling him Goldry's self could hold no longer against such odds, that the centre yet held, but at the next onset was like to break, or the right wing else be driven in upon their rear, and all overwhelmed. If your highness cannot throw back Corrand, all is lost in these short minutes' lull. If lull it were, when all the time the battle like a sounding sea rolled on with a ceaseless noise of riding and slaying and the clang of arms, Just chose, Demonland and the whole world's destinies hung on his choice. He had no counsellor. He had no time for slow deliberation. In such a moment, imagination, resolution, swift decision, all high gifts of nature, are naught. Swift horses gulfed and lost in the pit which fate the enemy digged in the way before them, except painful knowledge, stored up patiently through years of practice, shall have prepared a road sure and clean for their flying hooves to bear them in the great hour of destiny. So it was from the beginning with all great captains, so with the Lord Jus in that hour when ruin swooped upon his armies. For 2 minutes' space he stood silent, then sent Bremery of Shores galloping westward, like one minded to break his neck with his orders to Lord Brandoch Daha, and Romanard eastward again to Spitfire. And Jus himself riding forward among his soldiers, shouted among them in a voice that was like a trumpet thundering, that they should now make ready for the fiercest trial of all. "Is my cousin mad?" said Lord Brandoch Daha, when he saw and understood the whole substance and matter of it. "Or hath he found Corrand so tame to deal with, he can make shift without me, and well nigh half his strength, and yet withstand him?" "He looseth this hold," answered Bremery, "to snatch at safety. 'Tis desperate, but all other ways we but wait on destruction. Our right is clean driven in, the left holdeth but hardly. He chargeth your highness, break their centre if you may. They have somewhat dangerously advanced their left, and therein is their momentary peril, if we be swift enough. But remember that here, or this side, is their greatest power before us, and if we be whelmed ere you can compass it. No more. But yes, said Lord Brandoch Daha, time gallopeth, so must we. Even so in that hour when Goldry and Zig, giving way step by step before superior odds, were bent back well nigh with their backs to the river, and Corrand on the demon's left had after a bitter battle checked and held them and threatened now to complete in one more great blow the ruin of them all, Jus, choosing a desperate expedient to meet a danger that else must destroy him. weakened his hard-pressed left to throw Brandoch Daha and well-nigh 800 horse into Spitfire's battle to drive a wedge betwixt Corsus and Corineus. It was now long past noon. The tempest of battle that had quietened a while for utter weariness roared forth anew from wing to wing as Brandoch Daha hurled his horsemen upon Corsus and the subject allies, while all along the battle line the demons rallied to fling back the enemy. For a breathless while the issue hung in suspense, then the men of Guta and Nevria broke and fled. Brandoch Daha and his cavalry swept through the gap, wheeled right and left, and took Corsus and Corineus in flank and rear. There fell in this onset Axticus, lord of Permio, the kings of Elien and Gilta, Gorius, the son of Corsus, the count of Giusha, and many other noblemen and men of mark. Of the demons, many were hurt and many slain, but none of great note save Camerar of Stropodon, whose head Corineus swapped off clean with a blow of his battle-axe, and Trentmar, whom Corsus smote full in the stomach with a javelin, so that he fell down from his horse and was dead at once. Now was all the left and centre of the witches' battle thrown into great confusion, and the allies most of all fallen into disorder, and fain to yield themselves and pray for mercy. The king, seeing the extent of this disaster, sent a galloper to Corund, who straightway sent to Corsus and Corineus, commanding them, "Get them at their speediest with all their folk back into Carca while time yet served." Himself, in the meantime, showing now, like the sun, his greatest countenance in his lowest estate, set on with his weary army to stem the advance of Jus, who now momently gathered fresh force against him, and to keep open for the rest of the king's forces their way by the bridge gate into Carca. Corineus, when he understood it, galloped thither with a band of men to aid Corund, and this did likewise Hemming and Decalagius and other captains of the witches. But Corsus himself, counting the day lost, and considering that he was an old man and had fought now long enough, gat him privily back into Carca as quickly as he was able. And truly he was bleeding from many wounds. By this great stand of Corund and his men was time won for a great part of the residue of the army to escape into Carca. And ever the witches were put aback and lost much ground. Yet ever the Lord Corund, by his great valiance and noble heart, recomforted his folk, so that they gave back very slowly, most bloodily disputing the ground foot by foot to the bridge gate, that they also might win in again, so many as might. Jus said, "This is the greatest deed of arms that ever I in the days of my life did see. And I have so great an admiration and wonder in my heart for Corund that almost I would give him peace. But I have sworn now to have no peace with Witchland. Lord Grow was in that battle with the demons. He ran Didaris through the neck with his sword, so that he fell down and was dead. Corund, when he saw it, heaved up his axe, but changed his intention in the manage, saying, O landskip of iniquity, shalt thou kill beside me the men of mine household? But my friendship sitteth not on a weather vane. Live, and be a traitor. But Grow, being mightily moved with these words, and staring at great Corund, wide-eyed like a man roused from a dream, answered, Have I done amiss? 'Tis easy remedied. Therewith he turned about and slew a man of Demonland, which Spitfire seeing, he cried out upon Grow in a great rage for a most filthy traitor, and bloodily rushing in thrust him through the buckler into the brain. In such wise and by such a sudden vengeance did the Lord Grow most miserably end his life, who, being a philosopher and a man of peace, careless of particular things of earth, had followed and observed all his days steadfastly one heavenly star. Yet now in the bloody battle before Carca died in the common opinion of men, a manifold perjured traitor that had at length gotten the guerdon of his guile, Now came the Lord Jus, with a great rout of men armed on his great horse, with his sword dripping with blood, and the battle sprang up into yet more noise and fury, and great manslaying befell, and many able men of which land fell in that stour, and the demons had almost put them from the bridge gate. But the Lord Corund, rallying his folk, swung back yet again the battle tide, albeit he was by a great odds outnumbered, and he sought none but Jus himself in that deadly melee. Cool. When he saw him coming, he refused him not, but made against him most fiercely, and with great clanging blows they swapped together a while, until Corund hewed Jus's shield asunder and struck him from his horse. Jus, leaping up again, thrust up at Corund with his sword, and with the violence of the blow, brake through the rings of his byrnie about his middle, and drave the sword into his breast. And Corund felled him to earth with a great downstroke on the helm, so that he lay senseless. Still the battle raged before the bridge gate, and great wounds were given and taken of either side. But now the sons of Corund saw that their father had lost much of his blood and waxed feeble, and the residue of his folk seeing it too, and seeing themselves so few against so many, began to be abashed. So those sons of Corund, riding up to him on either side with a band of men, made him turn back with them and go with them in by the gate to Carcere, the which he did like a man, amazed, and knowing not what he doeth. And indeed it was a great marvel how so great a lord, wounded to the death, might sit on horseback. In the great court he was gotten down from his horse. The Lady Presmira, when she perceived that his harness was all red with blood, and saw his wound, fell not down in a swoon as another might, but took his arm about her shoulder, and so supported, with her stepsons to help her, that great frame which could no more support itself, yet had till that hour borne up against the whole world's strength in arms. Leeches came that she had called for, and a litter, and they brought him to the banquet hall. But after no long while those learned men confessed his hurt was deadly, and all their cunning naught. Whereupon, much disdaining to die in bed, not in the field fighting with his enemies, the Lord Corund caused himself, completely armed and weaponed, with the stains and dust of the battle yet upon him, to be set in his chair, there to await death. Hemming, when this was done, came to tell it to the king, where from the tower above the water gate he beheld the end of this battle. The demons held the bridge house. The fight was done. The king sat in his chair looking down to the battlefield. His dark mantle was about his shoulders. He leaned forward, resting his chin in his hand. They of his bodyguard, 9 or 10, stood huddled together some yards away, as if afraid to approach him. As Hemming came near, the king turned his head slowly to look at him. The low sun, swinging blood-red over Tenemos, shone full on the king's face, and as Hemming looked in the face of the king, fear gat hold upon him, so that he durst not speak a word to the king, but made obeisance and departed again, trembling like one who has seen a sight beyond the veil. And how the Lord Corsus, being rejected of the king, turned his thoughts to other things in bay, and of the last conjuring that was in cark and the last wine. And how yet once again the lady, Presmira, spake with the lords of Demonland in Cark, Gorish. The king held in his private chamber a council of war on the morrow of the battle before Carke. The morning was overcast with sullen cloud, and though all the windows were thrown wide, the sluggish air hung heavy in the room, as if it too were pervaded by the cold, dark humour that clogged the vitals of those lords of Witchland like a drowsy drug. or as if the stars would breathe themselves for a greater mischief. Pale and drawn were those lords' faces, and, for all they strove to put on a brave countenance before the king, clean gone was the vigour and warlike mien that clothed them. But yesterday, only Corineus kept some spring of his old valiancy and portly bearing, seated with arms akimbo over against the king, his heavy underjaw set forward, and his nostrils wide. He had slept ill or watched late, for his eyes were bloodshot-en, and the breath of his nostrils was heavy with wine. "We tarry for Corsus," said the king. "Had he not word of my bidding?" Decalagus said. "Lord, I will summon him again. These misfortunes, I fear me, hang heavy on his mind, and, by your majesty's leave, he is scarce his own man since yesterday." "Do it straight," said the king. "Give me thy papers, Corineus. Thou art my general since Corundgate his death. I will see what yesterday hath cost us, and what power yet remaineth to crush me, these snakes by force of arms." "These be the numbers, O king," said Corineus, "but 3,500 fighting men, and well nigh half of these overmuch crippled with wounds to do aught save behind closed walls. It were but to give the demons easy victory to adventure against them, that stand before Carca, 4,000 sound men in arms." The king blew scornfully through his nostrils. "Who told thee their strength?" said he. "It were dangerous to write them down a man fewer," answered Corineus. And Hackman said, "My lord the king, I would adventure my head. They have more. And your majesty will not forget they be all flown with eagerness and pride after yesterday's field, whereas our men—" "Were ye sons of Corund?" said the king, breaking in quietly on his speech and looking dangerously upon him. "But twigs of your father's tree, that he being cut down ye had no manhood left nor vital sap, but straight wither in idiotish dotage? I will not have these womanish counsels spoken, Carci, no, nor thought in Carca." Corineus said, "We had sure intelligence, O king, when as they landed, that their main army was 6,000 fighting men, and last night myself spake with full a score of our officers, and had a true tale of some few of the demons captured by us before they were slain with the sword. When I say to you just standeth before Carca 4,000 strong, I swell not the truth. His losses yesterday were but a flea-biting gainst ours." The king nodded a curt assent. Corineus proceeded, "If we might contrive indeed to raise help from without Carca, were it but 500 spears to distract his mind some part from usward, not but your majesty's strict command should stay me, but I should assault him. It were perilous even so, but never have you known me leave a fruit unplucked at for fear of thorns. But until that time, naught but your straight command might win me to essay a sally, since well I wot it were my death and the ruin of you, O king, and of all Witchland." The king listened with unmoved countenance. His shaven lip set somewhat in a sneer, his eyes half closed like the eyes of a cat couched sphinx-like in the sun. But no sun shone in that council-chamber. The leaden pall hung darker without, even as morning grew toward noon. "My lord the king," said Hemming, "send me." "To overstep their guards I'd the night. 'Tis not a thing beyond invention. That done, I gather you some small head of men, enough to serve this turn if I must rake the 7 kingdoms to find 'em." While Hemming spoke, the door opened, and the Duke Corsus entered the chamber. An ill sight was he, flabbier of cheek and duller of eye than was his wont. His face was bloodless, his great paunch seemed shrunken, and his shoulders yet more hunched since yesterday. His gait was uncertain, and his hand shook as he moved the chair from the board and took his seat before the king. The king looked on him a while in silence, and under that gaze beads of sweat stood on Corsus's brow, and his underlip twitched. "We need thy counsel, O Corsus," said the king. "Thus it is, since our ill-faced stars gave victory to the demon rebels in yesterday's battle, Jus and his brethren front us with 4,000 men, whiles I have not 2,000 soldiers unhurt in Carca. Corinius accounteth us too weak to risk a sally. But, and if we might contrive some diversion from without, and that, after yesterday, is not to be thought on. Hither and to Melikafkaz did we draw all our powers, and the subject, allies not for our love, but for fear sake and for lust of gain, flocked to our standard. These caterpillars drop off now. Yet if we fight not, then is our strength in arms clean spent, and our enemies need but to sit before Carca till we be starved. 'Tis a point of great difficulty and knotty to solve." "Difficult indeed, O my lord the king," said Corsus. His glance shifted round the board, avoiding the steady gaze bent on him from beneath the eaves of King Goris's brow, and resting at last on the jewelled splendor of the crown of Witchland on the king's head. "O king," he said, "you demand my reader, and I shall not say nor counsel you. Nothing but that good and well shall come thereof, as much as yet may be in this pass we stand in. For now is our greatness turned in woe, dolour, and heaviness, and easy it is to be after-witted." He paused, and his underjaw wobbled and twitched. "Speak on," said the king. "Thou stutterest forth nothings by fits and girds, as an ague taketh a goose. Let me know thy reedy." Corsus said, "You will not take it, I know, O king. For we of Witchland have ever been ruled by the rock rather than by the rudder. I had liever be silent. Silence was never written down." "Thou wouldst, and thou wouldst not," said the king. "Whence gottest thou this look of a dish of whey with blood spit in it? Speak, or thou'lt anger me." "Then blame me not, O king," said Corsus. "Thus it seemeth to me that the hour hath struck, whenas we of Witchland must needs look calamity in the eye, and acknowledge we have thrown our last, and lost all. The demons, as we have seen to our undoing, be unconquerable in war. Yet are their minds pranked with many silly fantasies of honour and courtesy, which may preserve us the poor dregs, yet unspilt from the cup of our fortune, if we but leave unseasonable pride and see where our advantage lieth." "Chat, chat, chat," said the king. "Perdition catch me if I can find a meaning in it. What dost thou bid me do?" Corsus met the king's eye at last. He braced himself as if to meet a blow. "Throw not your cloak in the fire because your house is burning, O king. Surrender all to Jus at his discretion. And trust me, the foolish softness of these demons will leave us freedom and the wherewithal to live at ease." The king was leaned a little forward as Corsus, somewhat dry-throated but gathering heart as he spake, blurted forth his counsel of defeat. No man among them looked on Corsus, but all on the king, and for a minute's space was no sound save the sound of breathing in that chamber. Then a puff of hot air blew a window to with a thud, and the king, without moving his head, rolled his awful glance forth and back over his counsel slowly, fixing each in his turn. And the king said, "Unto which of you is this counsel acceptable? Let him speak and instruct us." All did sit mum like beasts. The king spake again, saying, "It is well. Were there of my counsel such another vermin, so sottish, so louse-hearted as this one hath proclaimed himself, I had been persuaded. Witchland was a sleepy pair, corrupted in her inward parts. And that was so. I had given orders straightway for the sally, and, for his chastening and your dishonour, this Corsus should have led you. And so an end, ere the imposthume of our shame break forth too foul before earth and heaven." "I admire not, lord, that you do strike at me," said Corsus. Yet I pray you think how many kings in Carca have heaped with injurious indignities them that were so hardy as give them wholesome counsel afore their fall. Though your majesty were a half-god or a fury out of the pit, you could not by further resisting deliver us out of this net wherein the demons have gotten us caught and tied. You can keep geese no longer, O king. Will you rend me because I bid you be content to keep goslings? Corineus smote the table with his fist. O monstrous vermin, he cried, because thou wast scalded, must all we be afeard of cold water? But the king stood up in his majesty, and Corsus shrank beneath the flame of his royal anger. And the king spake and said, The council is up, my lords. For thee, Corsus, I dismiss thee from my council. Thou art to thank my clemency, that I take not thy head for this. It were for thy better safety, which well I know thou prizest dearer than mine honour, that thou show not in my path till these perilous days be overpast. And unto Corineus he said, On thy head it lieth that the demons storm not the hold, as haply their hot pride may incense them to attempt. Expect me not at supper. I lie in the iron tower tonight, and let none disturb me there at peril of his head. You of my council must attend me here 4 hours ere tomorrow's noon. Look to it well, Corineus, that naught shalt thou do, nor in any wise adventure our forces against the demons till thou receive my further bidding, save only to hold Carca against any assault if need be. For this thy life shall answer. For the demons, they were wisest praise a fair day at night. If mine enemy uproot a boulder above my dwelling, so I be mighty enow of mine hands. I may, even in the nick of time that it tottereth to leap and crush mine house, or set it on him and pash him to a mummy. So speaking, the king moved resolute with a great strong step toward the door. There paused he, his hand upon the silver latch, and looking tigerishly on Corsus. Be advised, he said, thou cross not my path again, nor, while I think on't, send me not thy daughter again, as last year thou didst. Apt to the sport she is, and well enow she served my turn aforetime. But the king of Witchland suppeth not twice of the same dish, nor lacketh he fresh wenches if he need them. Whereat all they laughed. But Corsus's face grew red as blood. On such wise brake up the council. Corineus, with the sons of Corund and of Corsus, went upon the walls, ordering all in obedience to the word of Goris the king. But that old Duke Corsus betook him to his chamber in the north gallery. Nor might he abide even a small while at ease, but sate now in his carven chair, now on the window-sill, now on his broad canopied bed, and now walked the chamber floor, twisting his hands and gnawing his lip. And if he were distraught in mind, small wonder it were, set as he was betwixt hawk and buzzard, the king's wrath menacing him in Carca, and the hosts of demon land without. So wore the day till supper-time. And at supper was Corsus, to their much amaze, sitting in his place, and the ladies Zenambria and Shriva with him. He drank deep, and when supper was done, he filled a goblet, saying, My lord, the king of demon land and ye other witches, good it is that we, who stand as now we stand, with one foot in the jaws of destruction, should bear with one another. Neither should any hide his thought from other, but say openly, even as I this morning before the face of our lord the king, his thought and counsel. Wherefore without shame do I confess me ill advised today, when I urged the king to make peace with demon land. I wax old, and old men will oft embrace timorous counsels which, if there be wisdom and valiancy left in them, they soon renounce when the stress is overpast, and they have leisure to afterthink them with a sad mind. And clear as day it is that the king was right. both in his chastening of my faint courage and in his bidding thee, O King Corineus, stand to thy watch, and do naught till this night be worn. For, went he not to the iron tower? And to what end else spendeth he the night in yonder chamber of dread, than to do sorcery or his magic art? As aforetime he did, and in such wise blast these demons to perdition even in the springtide of their fortunes. At no point of time hath Witchland greater need of our wishes than at this coming midnight. And I pray you, my lords, let us meet a little before in this hall, that we with one heart and mind may drink fair fortune to the king's enchantery. With such pleasant words and sympathetical insinuations, working at a season when the wine-cup had caused unfold some gayness in their hearts that were fordone with the hard scapes and chances of disastrous war, was Corsus grown to friendship again with the lords of Witchland? So, when the guard was set and all made sure for the night, they came together in the great banquet hall, whereas more than 3 years ago the Prince Lafayette had feasted and after fought against them of Witchland. But now was he drowned among the shifting tides in the straits of Melikafkaz. And the Lord Karund, that fought that night in such valiant wise, now in that same hall, armed from throat to foot as becometh a great soldier dead, lay in state, crowned on his brow with the amethystine crown of Impland. The spacious side benches were untenanted, and void their high seats, and the cross bench was removed to make place for Corrun's bier. The lords of Witchland sate at a small table below the dais, Corineus in the seat of honour at the end nearest the door, and over against him Corsus. And on Corineus's left Zenambria, and on his right Decalagius' son to Corsus, and then Hemming, and on Corsus's left his daughter Shriva, and those 2 remaining of Corrun's sons on his right. All were there, save Presmyra, and her had none seen since her lord's death, but she kept her chamber. Flamboys stood in the silver stands as of old, lighting the lonely spaces of the hall, and 4 candles shivered round the bier where Corrun slept. Fair goblets stood on the board brimmed with dark, sweet Thramnian wine, one for each feaster there, and cold bacon pies and botargos and crawfish in hypocras sauce furnished a light midnight meal. Now scarce were they set, when the flamboys burned pale in a strange light from without doors, an evil, pallid, bale-like low, such as Grow had beheld in days gone by when King Goris the Teth first conjured in khaki. Corineus paused ere taking his seat. Goodly and stalwart he showed in his blue silk cloak and silvered byrnie, the fair crown of Demonland, wherewith Corsus had been enforced to crown him on that great night in Auswick, shone above his light brown curling hair. Youth and lustihood stood forth in every line of his great frame, and on his bare arms smooth and brawny, with their wristlets of gold. But somewhat ghastly was the corpse-like pallor of that light on his shaven jowl, and his thick, scornful lips were blackened, like those of poisoned men in that light of bale. "Saw ye not this light aforetime?" he cried, "and 'twas the shadow before the sun of our omnipotence? Fate's hammer is lifted up to strike. Drink with me to our Lord the King, that laboureth with destiny." All drank deep, and Corineus said, "Pass we on the cups, that each may drain his neighbour's. 'Tis an old lucky custom. Corund taught me out of Impland. Swift, for the fate of Witchland is poised in the balance." Therewith he passed his cup to Zenambria, who quaffed it to the dregs. And all they, passing on their cups, drank deep again, all save Corsus alone. But Corsus's eyes were big with terror as he looked on the cup passed on to him by Corrun's son. "Drink, O Corsus," said Corineus, and seeing him still waver, "What ails the old doting disard?" he cried. He stareth on good wine with an eye as ghastly as a mad dog's beholding water. In that instant the unearthly glare went out as a lamp in a gust of wind, and only the flamboys and the funeral candles flickered on the feasters with uncertain radiance. Corineus said again, "Drink!" But Corsus set down the cup untasted and stayed irresolute. Corineus opened his mouth to speak, and his jaw fell, as of a man that conceiveth suddenly some dread suspicion. But ere he might speak word, a blinding flash went from earth to heaven, and the firm floor of the banquet hall rocked and shook as with an earthquake. All save Corineus fell back into their seats, clutching the table, amazed and dumb. Crash after crash! After the listening ear was well nigh split by the roar, the horror broken out of the bowels of night thundered and ravened in Carcae. Laughter, as of damned souls banqueting in hell, rode on the tortured air. Wildfire tore the darkness asunder, half blinding them that sat about that table. And Corineus gripped the board with either hand as a last deafening crash shook the walls, and a flame rushed up the night, lighting the whole sky with a livid glare. And in that trisalk flash Corineus beheld through the southwest window the iron tower blasted and cleft asunder, and the next instant fallen in an avalanche of red-hot ruin. "The keep hath fallen!" he cried, and, deadly wearied on a sudden, he sank heavily into his seat. The cataclysm was passed by like a wind in the night, but now was heard a sound as of the enemy rushing to the assault. Corineus strove to rise, but his legs were over-feeble. His eye lit on Corsus's untasted cup, that which was passed on to him by Viglus Coron's son, and he cried, "What devil's work is this? I have a strange numbness in my bones. By heavens, thou shalt drink that cup or die." Viglus, his eyes protruding, his hand clutching at his breast, struggled to rise but could not. Hemming half staggered up, fumbling for his sword, then pitched forward on the table with a horrid rattle of the throat. But Corsus leaped up trembling, his dull eyes aflame with triumphant malice. "The king hath thrown and lost," he cried, as well I foresaw it. "And now have the children of night taken him to themselves. And thou, damned Corineus, and you sons of Corund, are but dead swine before me. Ye have all drunk venom, and ye are dead. Now will I deliver up Carcae to the demons, and it and your bodies, with mine electuary rotting in your vitals, shall buy me peace from demon-land." "Oh, horrible! Then I too am poisoned," cried the lady Zenambria, and she fell a-swooning. "'Tis pity," said Corsus. "Blame the passing of the cups for that. I might not speak ere the poison had chained me the limbs of these cursed devils, and made 'em harmless." Corineus's jaw set like a bulldog's. Painfully gritting his teeth, he rose from his seat, his sword naked in his hand. Corsus, that was now passing near him on his way to the door, saw too late that he had reckoned without his host. Corineus, albeit the baneful drug bound his legs as with a cerecloth, was yet too swift for Corsus, who, fleeing before him to the door, had but time to clutch the heavy curtains ere the sword of Corineus took him in the back. He fell, and lay a-writhing lumpishly like a toad spitted on a skewer, and the floor of steatite was made slippery with his blood. "'Tis well. Through the guts," said Corineus. "No might he had to draw forth the sword, but staggered as one drunken, and fell to earth, propped against the jambs of the lofty doorway. Some, while he lay there, hearkening to the sounds of battle without, for the iron tower was fallen athwart the outer wall, making a breach through all lines of defence. And through that breach the demons stormed the hold of Carcae, that never unfriendly foot had entered by force in all the centuries, since it was builded by Goris I, an ill watch It was for Corineus to lie hearkening to that unequal fight, unable to stir a hand, and all they that should have headed the defence, dead or dying, before his eyes. Yet was his breath lightened and his pain some part eased when his eye rested on the gross body of Corsus, twisting in the agony of death upon his sword. In such wise passed well nigh an hour. The bodily strength of Corineus and his iron heart bear up against the power of the venom long after those others have breathed out their souls in death. But now was the battle done and the victory with them of Demonland, and the lords, Jus and Goldry, Blusco and Brandoch Daha, with certain of their fighting men, came into the banquet hall. Smeared they were with blood and the dust of battle. For not without great blows and the death of many a stout lad had the hold been won. Goldry said as they paused at the threshold, "This is the very banquet house of death. How came these by their end?" Corineus's brow darkened at the sight of the lords of Demonland, and mightily he strove to raise himself, but sank back groaning. "I have gotten an everlasting chill of the bones," he said. "Yon hellish traitor murthered us all by poison. Else should some of you have gotten your deaths by me, or ever ye won up into Carcae." "Bring him some water," said Jus. And he, with Brandoch Daha, gently lifted Corineus and bare him to his chair, where he should be more at ease. Goldry said, "Here is a lady liveth." For Shriva, that sitting on her father's left hand, had so escaped a poisoned draught at the passing of the cups, rose from the table where she had cowered in fearful silence, and cast herself in a flood of tears and terrified supplications about Goldry's knees. Goldry bade guard her to the camp, and there bestow her in safe asylum until the morning. Now was Corineus near his end, but he gathered strength to speak, saying, "I do joy that not by your sword were we put down, but by the unequal trumpery of fortune." Whose tool was this? Corsus and the king's devilish pride, that desired to harness heaven and hell to his chariot? Fortune's a right strumpet, to fondle me in the neck, and now yert me one thus, eyes the midriff. "Not fortune, my lord Corineus, but the gods," said Goldry, whose feet be shod with wool. By then was water brought in, and Brandoch Daha would have given him to drink. But Corineus would have none of it, but jerked his head aside and o'erset the cup, and looking fiercely on Lord Brandoch Daha, "Vile fellow," he said, "so thou too art come to insult on Witchland's grave? Thou'd strike me now into the centre, and thou wert not more a dancing madam than a soldier." "How?" said Brandoch Daha. "Say a dog bite me in the ham, must I bite him again the same part?" Corineus's eyelids closed, and he said weakly, "How look thy womanish gewgaws in Crothering since I toused 'em?" And therewith the creeping poison reached his strong heartstrings, and he died. Now was silence for a space in that banquet hall, and in the silence a step was heard, and the lords of Demonland turned toward the lofty doorway, that yawned as an arched cavern mouth of darkness, for Corsus had torn down the arras curtains in his death throes, and they lay heaped athwart the threshold with his dead body across them. Corineus's sword hilts jammed against his ribs, and the blade standing a foot's length forth from his breast. And while they gazed, there walked into the shifting light of the flamboys over that threshold the Lady Presmyra, crowned and arrayed in her rich robes and ornaments of state. Her countenance was bleak as the winter moon flying high amid light clouds on a windy midnight settling towards rain. And those lords, under the spell of her sad cold beauty, stood without speech. In a while Jus, speaking as one who needeth to command his voice, and making grave obeisance to her, said, "O Queen, we give you peace. Command our service in all things whatsoever. And first in this, which shall be our earliest task ere we sail homeward, to stablish you in your rightful realm of Pixieland. But this hour is overcharged with fate and desperate deeds to suffer counsel. Counsel is for the morning. The night calleth to rest. I pray you give us leave." Presmyra looked upon Jus, and there was eye-bite in her eyes that glinted with green metallic lustre like those of a she-lion brought to battle. "Thou dost offer me Pixieland? My lord Jus," said she, "that am queen of Impland. And this night, thou thinkest, can bring me rest. These that were dear to me have rest indeed, my lord and lover. Corund, the prince, my brother, Grow, that was my friend. Deadlier now they found you, whether as friends or foes." Jus said, "O Queen Presmyra, the nest falleth with the tree. These things hath fate brought to pass, and we be but fate's whipping tops, banded what way she will. Against thee we war not, and I swear to thee that all our care is to make thee amends." "Oh, thine oaths," said Presmyra. "What amends canst thou make? Youth I have, and some poor beauty. Wilt thou conjure those 3 dead men alive again that ye have slain? For all thy vaunted art, I think this were too hard a task." All they were silent, eyeing her as she walked delicately past the table. She looked with a distant and, to outward seeming, uncomprehending eye on the dead feasters and their empty cups. Empty all, save that one passed on by Vigilus, whereof Corsus would not drink, and it stood half-drained. Of curious workmanship it was, of pale green glass, its stand formed of 3 serpents intertwined, the one of gold, another of silver, the third of iron. Fingering it carelessly, she raised her glittering eyes once more on the demons, and said, "It was ever the wont of you of Demonland to eat the egg and give away the shell in arms." And pointing at the lords of Witchland dead at the feast, she asked, "Were these also your victims in this day's hunting, my lords?" "Thou dost us wrong, madam," cried Goldry. "Never hath Demonland used such like arts against her enemies." "Lord Brandoch." Daha looked swiftly at him, and stepped idly forward, saying, "I know not what art hath wrought yon goblet, but 'tis strangely like to one I saw in Impland. Yet fairer is this, and of more just proportions." But Presmyra forestalled his outstretched hand, and quietly drew the cup towards her out of reach. As sword crosses sword, the glance of her green eyes crossed his, and she said, "Think not that you have a worse enemy left on earth than me. I it was that sent Corsus and Corinius to trample Demonland in the mire. Had I but some spark of masculine virtue, some soul at least of you should yet be loosed, squealing to the shades to attend my dear ones ere I set sail. But I have none. Kill me then, and let me go." Jus, whose sword was bare in his hand, smote it home in the scabbard and stepped towards her, but the table was betwixt them, and she drew back to the dais where Corund lay in state. There, like some triumphant goddess, she stood above them, the cup of venom in her hand. "Come not beyond the table, my lords," she said, "or I drain this cup to your damnation." "Brandoch," Daha said, "the dice are thrown, O Jus, and the queen hath won the hazard." "Madam," said Jus, "I swear to you there shall no force nor restraint be put upon you, but honour only and worship shown you. And friendship, if you will, that surely mightest thou take of us for thy brother's sake." Thereat she looked terribly upon him, and he said, "Only on this wild night lay not hands upon yourself. For their sake, that even now haply behold us out of the undiscovered barren lands, beyond the dismal lake, do not this." Still facing them, the cup still aloft in her right hand, Presmyra laid her left hand lightly on the brazen plates of Corund's byrnie that cased the mighty muscles of his breast. Her hand touched his beard and drew back suddenly, but in an instant she laid it gently again on his breast. Somewhat, her orient loveliness seemed to soften for a passing minute in the altering light, and she said, "I was given to Corrand young. This night I will sleep with him, or reign with him among the mighty nations of the dead." Just moved as one about to speak, but she stayed him with a look, and the lines of her body hardened again, and the lioness looked forth anew in her peerless eyes. "Hath your greatness," she said, "so much outgrown your wit, that you think I will abide to be your pensioner, that have been a princess in Pixieland, a queen of far-fronted Impland, and wife to the greatest soldier in this hold of Karka, which till this day hath been the only scourge and terror of the world? O my lords of Demonland, good comfortable fools, speak to me no more, for your speech is folly. Go, doff your hats to the silly hind that runneth on the mountain. Pray her gently dwell with you amid your stalled cattle, when you have slain her mate. Shall the blackening frost, when it hath blasted and starved all the sweet garden flowers, say to the rose, abide with us, and shall she hearken to such a wolfish suit?" So speaking, she drank the cup, and turning from those lords of Demonland as a queen turneth her from the unregarded multitude, kneeled gently down by Corrand's bier, her white arms clasped about his head, her face pillowed on his breast. When just spake, his voice was choked with tears. He commanded Bremery that they should take up the bodies of Corsus and Zenambria, and those sons of Corrand and of Corsus that lay poisoned and dead in that hall, and on the morrow give them reverent burial. And for the Lord Corineus, I will that ye make a bed of state, that he may lie in this hall tonight, and tomorrow will we lay him in Hau before Karka, as is fitting for so renowned a captain. But great Corrand and his lady shall none depart one from the other, but in one grave shall they rest, side by side, for their love's sake. Ere we be gone, I will rear them such a monument as beseemeth great kings and princes when they die. For royal and lordly was Corrand, and a mighty man at arms, and a fighter clean of hand, albeit our bitter enemy. Wondrous it is with what cords of love he bound to him this unparagoned queen of his, who hath known her like among women for trueness and highness of heart, and sure none was ever more unfortunate. Now went they forth into the outer ward of Karkay. The night bore still some signs of that commotion of the skies that had so lately burst forth and passed away, and some torn poles of thundercloud yet hung athwart the face of heaven. Betwixt them, in the swept places of the sky, a few stars shivered, and the moon, more than half waxen towards her full, was sinking over Tenemos. Some faint breath of autumn was abroad, and the demon shuddered a little, fresh from the heavy air of the great banquet hall. The ruins of the iron tower smoking to the sky, and the torn and tumbled masses of masonry about it, showed monstrous in the gloom as fragments of old chaos, and from them and from the riven earth beneath steamed up pungent fumes as of brimstone burning. Ever busily, back and forth through those sulphurous vapours, obscene birds of the night flitted a weary round, and bats on leathern wing fitfully and dimly seem in the uncertain murk, save when their passage brought them dark against the moon, and from the solitudes of the mournful fen afar, voices of lamentation floated on the night, wild wailing cries and sobbing noises and long moans rising and falling and quivering down to silence. Just laid his hand on Goldry's arm, saying, "There is naught earthly in these laments, nor be those that thou seest circling in the reek, very bats or owls. These be his masterless familiars wailing for their lord. Many such served him, simple earthy divels and divels of the air and of the water. held by him in thrall by sorcerous and artificial practices, coming and going and doing his will. These availed him not, said Goldry, nor the sword of Witchland against our might and main, that brake it asunder in his hand, and slew his mighty men of valour. Yet true it is, said Lord Juss, that none greater hath lived on earth than King Goris the Teth. When after these long wars we held him as a stag at bay, he feared not to essay a second time, and this time unaided and alone, what no man else hath so much as once performed and lived. And well he knew that that which was summoned by him out of the deep must spill and blast him utterly, if he should slip one whit, as slip he did in former days, but his disciples succoured him. Behold now with what loud striking of thunder, unconquered by any earthly power, he hath his parting with this carker black and smoking in ruin for his monument. These lords of Witchland, and hundreds besides of our soldiers and of the witches, for his funeral bakemeats, and spirits weeping in the night for his chief mourners. So came they again to the camp. And in due time the moon set, and the clouds departed, and the quiet stars pursued their eternal way until night's decline, as if this night had been but as other nights, this night which had beheld the power and glory that was Witchland by such a hammer-stroke of destiny, smitten in pieces. The entertainment given by Lord Juss in Demonland to Queen Sophonispe, fosterling of the gods, and of that circumstance which, beyond all the wonders fair and lovely to behold shown here, in that country made here most to marvel, wherein is a rare example how in a fortunate world, out of all expectation, in the spring of the year, cometh a new birth. Now the returning months brought the season of the year when Queen Sophonisba should come according to her promise to guest with Lord Juss in Galing. And so it was that in the hush of a windless April dawn, the Simiambian caravel that bare the Queen to Demonland rode up the firth to Looking Haven. All the east was a bower for the golden dawn. Kartadza, sharp outlined as if cut in bronze, still hid the sun, and in the great shadow of the mountain, the haven, and the low hills, and the groves of holm oak and strawberry tree slumbered in a deep obscurity of blues and purples, against which the avenues of pink almond blossom and the white marble quays were bodied forth in pale wakening beauty, imaged as in a looking-glass in that tranquillity of the sea. Westward across the firth all the land was aglow with the opening day. Snow lingered still on the higher summits. Cloudless, bathing in the golden light, they stood against the blue Dina, the forks of Nontreganon, Piker Shards, and all the peaks of the Thornbeck Range and Neverdale. Morning laughed on their high ridges, and kissed the woods that clung about their lower limbs, billowy woods, where rich hues of brown and purple told of every twig on all their myriad branches thick and afire with buds. White mists lay like coverlets on the water meadows where Tiveranderdale opens to the sea. On the shores of Bothry and Scaramsey, and on the mainland near the great bluff of Thremnia's Hew, and a little south of Owlswick, clear spaces among the birchwoods showed gold and yellow, daffodils abloom in the spring. They rode in to the northernmost berth and made fast the caravel. The sweetness of the almond trees was the sweetness of spring in the air, and spring was in the face of that queen as she came with her attendants up the shining steps, her little martlets circling about her or perching on her shoulders, she to whom the gods of old gave youth everlasting and peace everlasting in Costrabelorn. Lord Juss and his brethren were on the quay to meet her, and the Lord Brandoch Daha, They bowed in turn, kissing her hands and bidding her welcome to Demonland. But she said, "Not to Demonland alone, my lords, but to the world again. And toward which of all earth's harbours should I steer? And toward which land, if not to this land of yours, who have by your victories brought peace and joy to all the world? Surely peace slept not more softly on the Maruna in old days, before the names of Goris and Witchland were heard in that country, than she shall sleep for us on this new earth and Demonland, now that those names are drowned forever under the whirlpools of oblivion and darkness." Just said, "O Queen Sophonisba, desire not that the names of great men dead should be forgot forever. So should these wars that we last year brought to so mighty a conclusion, to make us undisputed lords of the earth, go down to oblivion with them that fought against us. But the fame of these things shall be on the lips and in the songs of men from one generation to another, so long as the world shall endure." They took horse and rode up from the harbour to the upper road, and so through open pastures on to Havishore tongue. Lambs frisked on the dewy meadows beside the road. Blackbirds flew from bush to bush, larks trilled in the sightless sky, and as they came down through the woods to Beckfoot Wood, pigeons cooed in the trees, and squirrels peeped with beady eyes. The Queen spoke little. These and all shy things of the woods and field held her in thrall, charming her to a silence that was broken only now and then by a little exclamation of joy. The Lord Jus, who himself also loved these things, watched her delight. Now they wound up the steep ascent from Beckfoot and rode into Galing by the Lion Gate. The avenue of Irish yews was lined by soldiers of the bodyguards of Jus, Goldry, and Spitfire, and Brandoch Daha. These, in honour of their great masters and of the Queen, lifted their spears aloft, while trumpeters blew 3 fanfares on silver trumpets. Then, to an accompaniment of lutes and thearbos and cithens moving above the pulse of muffled drums, a choir of maidens sang a song of welcome, strewing the path before the lords of Demonland and the Queen with sweet white hyacinths and narcissus blooms, while the ladies, Mevrian and Armeline, more lovely than any queens of earth, waited at the head of the golden staircase above the inner court to greet Queen Sophonisba, come to Galing, a hard matter. It were to tell of all the pleasures prepared for Queen Sophonisba and for her delight by the lords of Demonland. The first day she spent among the parks and pleasure gardens of Galing, where Lord Jus showed her his great lime avenues, his yew houses, his fruit gardens and sunk gardens, and his private walks and bowers, his walks of creeping thyme, which being trodden on sends up sweet odours to refresh the treader, his ancient water gardens beside the Brankdale Beck, whither the water nymphs resort in summer and are seen under the moon, singing and combing their hair with combs of gold. On the second day he showed her his herb gardens, disclosing to her the secret properties of herbs, wherein he was deeply learned. There grew that zamalentichion, which, being well beaten up with fat without salt, is sovereign for all wounds, and dittany, which, if eaten soon, puts out the arrow and healeth the wounds, and not only by its presence stayeth snakes wheresoever they be handy to it, but by reason of its smell carried by wind, and they smell it, they die. And mandragora, which being taken into the middle of an house, compelleth all evils out of the house, and relieveth also headaches, and produceth sleep. Also he showed her sea holly in his garden. That is born in secret places, and in wet ones, and the root of it is as the head of that monster which men name the Gorgon, and the root twigs have both eyes and nose, and colour of serpents. Of this he told her how, when taking up the root, a man must see to it that no sun shine on it, and he who would carve it must avert his head, for it is not permitted that man may see that root unharmed. The third day just showed the queen his stables. Where were his war horses, and horses for the chase, and for chariot racing stabled in stalls with furniture of silver? And much she marvelled at his 7 white mares, sisters, so like that none might tell one from another, given him in days gone by the priests of Artemis in the lands beyond the sunset. They were immortal, bearing ichor in their veins, not blood, and the fire of it showed in their eyes like lamps burning. The 4th night and the 5th, the queen was at Dripabee, guesting with Lord Goldry Brusco and the Princess Armeline that were wedded in Zaja Zaquolo last Yule, and the 6th and 7th nights at Owlswick, and there Spitfire made her lordly entertainment. But Lord Brandosh Daha would not have the queen go yet to Crothering, for he had not yet made fair again his gardens and pleasaunces, and restored his rich and goodly treasures to his mind after their ill handling by Corineus, and it was not his will that she should look on Crothering Castle until all was there stablished anew according to its ancient glory. The 8th day she came again to Galing, and now Lord Juss showed her his study, with his astrolabes of orichalk, figured with all the signs of the zodiac and the mansions of the moon, standing a tall man's height above the floor, and his perspectives and globes and crystals and hollow-looking glasses, and great crystal globes where he kept homunculi whom he had made by secret processes of nature, both men and women, less than a span long, as beautiful as one could wish to see in their little coats, eating and drinking and going their ways in those mighty globes of crystal where his art had given them being. Every night, whether at Galing, Owlswick, or Dripabee Mere, was feasting held in her honour, with music and dancing and merrymaking and all delight, and poetical recitations and feats of arms and horsemanship, and masques and interludes, the like whereof hath not been seen on earth for beauty and wit and all magnificence. Now was the 9th day come of the Queen's guesting in Demonland, and it was the eve of Lord Juss's birthday, when all the great ones in the land were come together, as 4 years ago they came, to do honour on the morrow unto him and unto his brethren, as was their wont aforetime. It was fine bright weather, with every little while a shower to bring fresh sweetness to the air, colour and refreshment to the earth, and gladness to the sunshine. Juss walked with the Queen in the morning in the woods of Moongarth Bottom, now bursting into leaf, and after their midday meal showed her his treasuries cut in the live rock under Galing Castle, where she beheld bars of gold and silver piled like trunks of trees, unhewn crystals of ruby, chrysoprase, or hyacinth, so heavy a strong man might not lift them, stacks of ivory in the tusk piled to the ceiling, chests and jars filled with perfumes and costly spices, ambergris, frankincense, sweet-scented sandalwood and myrrh and spikenard, cups and beakers and eared wine jars and lamps and caskets made of pure gold, worked and chased with the forms of men and women and birds and beasts and creeping things, and ornamented with jewels beyond price, margarites and pink and yellow sapphires, smaragds and chrysoberyls and yellow diamonds. When the Queen had had her fill of gazing on these, he carried her to his great library, where statues stood of the 9 muses about Apollo, and all the walls were hidden with books, histories, and songs of old days, books of philosophy, alchemy, and astronomy, and art magic, romances, and music, and lives of great men, dead, and great treatises of all the arts of peace and war, with pictures and illuminated characters. Great windows opened southward on the garden from the library, and climbing rose trees and plants of honeysuckle and evergreen magnolia clustered about the windows. Great chairs and couches stood about the open hearth, where a fire of cedar logs burned in winter-time. Lamps of moonstones, self-effulgent, shaded with cloudy green tourmaline, stood on silver stands on the table, and by each couch and chair, to give light when the day was over. And all the air was sweet, with the scent of dried rose leaves kept in ancient bowls and vases of painted earthenware. Queen Sophonisba said, "My lord, I love this best. Of all the fair things thou hast shown me in thy castle of Galing, here, where all trouble seems a forgotten echo of an ill world left behind. Surely my heart is glad, O my friend, that thou and these other lords of Demonland shall now enjoy your goodly treasures and fair days in your dear native land in peace and quietness all your lives." The Lord Jus stood at the window that looked westward across the lake to the great wall of the Scarf. Some shadow of a noble melancholy hovered about his sweet, dark countenance, as his gaze rested on a curtain of rain that swept across the face of the mountain wall, half veiling the high rock summits. "Yet think, madam," said he, "that we be young of years, and to strenuous minds there is an unquietude in over-quietness." Now he conducted her through his armories, where he kept his weapons and weapons for his fighting men, and all panoply of war. There he showed her swords and spears, maces and axes and daggers, all frayed and damascened and inlaid with jewels, burnies and baldricks and shields, blades so keen, a hair blown against them in a wind should be parted in twain, charmed helms on which no ordinary sword would bite. And Just said unto the queen, "Madam, what thinkest thou of these swords and spears? For know well that these be the ladder's rungs, that we of Demonland climbed up by to that signory and principality which now we hold over the four corners of the world." She answered, "O my lord, I think nobly of them. For an ill part it were while we joy in the harvest, to contemn the tools that prepared the land for it and reaped it." While she spoke, Just took down from its hook a great sword with a haft bound with plaited cords of gold and silver wire and cross hilts of latoon, set with studs of amethyst and Drake's head at either end of the hilt, with crimson almondines for his eyes, and the pommel a ball of deep, amber-coloured opal with red and green flashes. "With this sword," said he, "I went up with Gaslark to the gates of Karka 4 years gone by this summer, being clouded in my mind by the backwash of the sending of Goreesh the king. With this sword I fought an hour back to back with Brandoch Daha, against Corrund and Corinius and their ablest men, the greatest fight that ever I fought, and against the fearfullest odds. Witchland himself beheld us from Karka walls through the watery mist and glare, and marvelled that 2 men that are born of woman could perform such deeds. He untied the bands of the sword and drew it singing from its sheath. With this sword," he said, looking lovingly along the blade, "I have overcome hundreds of mine enemies, witches and ghouls, and barbarous people out of Impland and the southern seas, pirates of Esimotia and princes of the eastern main. With this sword I gat the victory in many a battle, and most glorious of all in the battle before Karka last September. There, fighting against great Corrund in the press of the fight, I gave him with this sword the wound that was his death wound." He put up the sword again in its sheath, held it a minute as if pondering whether or no to gird it about his waist, then slowly turned to its place on the wall and hung it up again. He carried his head high like a war-horse, keeping his gaze averted from the queen as they went out from the great armoury in Galing, yet not so skilfully, but she marked a glistening in his eye that seemed a tear standing above his lower eyelash. That night was supper set in Lord Jus's private chamber, a light regale, yet most sumptuous. They sat at a round table, 9 in company, the 3 brethren, the lords Brandoch Daha, Zig, and Volley, the ladies Armeline and Mevrian, and the queen. Brightly flowed the wines of Crothring and Novasp, and blithely went the talk to outward seeming. But ever and again silence swung athwart the board, like a grey pall, till Zig broke it with a jest, or Brandoch Daha, or his sister Mevrian. The queen felt the chill behind their merriment. The silent fits came oftener as the feast went forward, as if wine and good cheer had lost their native quality, and turned fathers of black moods and gloomy meditations. The Lord Goldry Blasco, that till now had spoke little, spake now not at all, his proud dark face fixed in staid pensive lines of thought. Spitfire too was fallen silent, his face leaned upon his hand, his brow bent, and whiles he drank amain, and whiles he drummed his fingers on the table, the Lord Brandoch Daha leaned back in his ivory chair, sipping his wine, very demure through half-closed eyes. Like a panther dozing in the noonday, he watched his companions at the feast. Like sunbeams chased by cloud shadows across a mountainside in windy weather, the lights of humorous enjoyment played across his face. The queen said, "O my lords, you have promised me I should hear the full tale of your wars in Impland and the Impland seas, and how you came to Karka, and of the great battle that there befell, and of the latter end of all the lords of Witchland, and of Garis the 12th, of memory accursed. I pray you let me hear it now, that our hearts may be gladdened by the tale of great deeds, the remembrance whereof shall be for all generations, and that we may rejoice anew that all the lords of Witchland are dead and gone, because of whom and their tyranny earth hath groaned and laboured these many years." Lord Jas, in whose face, when it was at rest, she had beheld that same melancholy which she had marked in him in the library that same day, poured forth more wine, and said, "O Queen Sophonisba, thou shalt hear it all." Therewith he told all that had befallen since they last bade her adieu in Costra Bellone, of the march to the sea at Muelva, of Laxus and his great fleet destroyed and sunk off Melikavkaz, of the battle before Kaki and its swinning fortunes, of the unhallowed light and flaring signs in heaven, whereby they knew of the king's conjuring again in Karka, of their waiting in the night, armed at all points, with charms and amulets ready against what dreadful birth might be from the king's enchantments, of the blasting of the iron tower and the storming of the hold in pitch darkness, of the lords of Witchland murdered at the feast, and naught left at last of the power and pomp and terror that was Witchland, save dying embers of a funeral fire and voices wailing in the wind before the dawn. When he had done, the queen said, as if talking in a dream, "Surely it may be said of these kings and lords of Witchland dead, these wretched eminent things, leave no more fame behind 'em than should one. Fall in a frost and leave his print in snow? As soon as the sun shines, it ever melts, both form and matter." With those words spoken, dropped silence again like a pall athwart that banquet table, more tristful than before and full of heaviness. On a sudden, Lord Brandoch Daha stood up, unbuckling from his shoulder his golden baldric set with apricot-coloured sapphires and diamonds and fire opals that imaged thunderbolts. He threw it before him on the table, with his sword clattering among the cups. "O Queen Sophonisba," said he, "thou hast spoken a fit funeral dirge for our glory as for Witchlands. This sword Zeldonius gave me. I bear it at Crothering's side against Corinius, when I threw him out of Demonland. I bear it at Melikavkaz. I bear it in the last great fight in Witchland. Thou wilt say it brought me good luck and victory in battle." But it brought not to me, as to Zeldonius, this last best luck of all, that earth should gape for me when my great deeds were ended." The queen looked at him amazed, marveling to see him so much moved that she had known until now so lazy mocking and so debonair. But the other lords of Demonland stood up and flung down their jewelled swords on the table beside Lord Brandoch Daha's. And Lord Just spake and said, "We may well cast down our swords as a last offering on Witchland's grave. For now must they rust, seamanship and all high arts of war must wither, and, now that our great enemies are dead and gone, we that were lords of all the world must turn shepherds and hunters, lest we become mere mountebanks and fops, fit fellows for the chambering Bestrians or the red foliot. O Queen Sophonisba, and you, my brethren and my friends, that are come to keep my birthday with me tomorrow in Galing, what make ye in holiday attire? Weep ye rather, and weep again, and clothe you all in black, thinking that our mightiest feats of arms and the high southing of the bright star of our magnificence should bring us unto timeless ruin. Thinking that we, that fought but for fighting's sake, have in the end fought so well, we never may fight more, unless it should be in fratricidal rage, each against each. And ere that should betide, may earth close over us, and our memory perish." Mightily moved was the queen to behold such a violent sorrow, albeit she could not comprehend the roots and reason of it. Her voice shook a little as she said, "My lord Jas, my lord Brandoch Daha, and you other lords of Demonland, it was little in mine expectation to find in you such a passion of sour discontent. For I came to rejoice with you, and strangely it soundeth in mine ear to hear you mourn and lament your worst enemies at so great hazard of your lives and all you held dear, struck down by you at last. I am but a maid and young in years, albeit my memory goeth back 200 springs, and ill it befitteth me to counsel great lords and men of war. Yet strange it seemeth, if there be not peaceful enjoyment and noble deeds of peace for you all your days, who are young and noble and lords of all the world, and rich in every treasure and high gifts of learning, and the fairest country in the world for your dear native land. And if your swords must not rust, ye may bear them against the uncivil races of Impland and other distant countries to bring them to subjection." But Lord Goldry Blusco laughed bitterly. "O Queen," he cried, "shall the correction of feeble savages content these swords, which have warred against the house of Goris and against all his chosen captains that upheld the great power of Carkai and the glory and the fear thereof?" And Spitfire said, "What joy shall we have of soft beds and delicate meats, and all the delights that be in many mountain Demonland, if we must be stingless drones, with no action to sharpen our appetite for ease?" All were silent a while. Then the Lord Just spake, saying, "O Queen Sophonisba, hast thou looked ever on a showery day in spring, upon the rainbow flung across earth and sky, and marked how all things of earth beyond it, trees, mountainsides and rivers and fields and woods and homes of men, are transfigured by the colours that are in the bow?" "Yes," she said, "and oft desired to reach them." "We," said Jus, "have flown beyond the rainbow, and there we found no fabled land of heart's desire, but wet rain and wind only, and the cold mountainside. And our hearts are cold because of it." The queen said, "How old art thou, my lord Jus, that thou speakest as an old man might speak?" He answered, "I shall be 33 years old tomorrow, and that is young by the reckoning of men. None of us be old, and my brethren and Lord Brandoch Daha younger than I. Yet as old men may we now look forth on our lives, since the goodness thereof is gone by for us." And he said, Thou, O Queen, canst scarcely know our grief. For to thee the blessed gods gave thy heart's desire, youth for ever and peace. Would they might give us our good gift, that should be youth for ever, and war, and unwaning strength and skill in arms. Would they might but give us our great enemies alive and whole again. For better it were, we should run hazard again of utter destruction, than thus live out our lives like cattle fattening for the slaughter, or like silly garden plants. The Queen's eyes were large with wonder. Thou couldst wish it, she said. Jas answered and said, A true saying it is that a grave is a rotten foundation. If thou shouldst proclaim to me at this instant the great king alive again and sitting again in Karkay, bidding us to the dread arbitrament of war, thou shouldst quickly see I told thee truth. While Jas spake, the Queen turned her gaze from one to another round the board. In every eye, when he spake of Karka, she saw the lightning of the joy of battle, as of life returning to men held in a deadly trance. And when he had done, she saw in every eye the light go out. Like gods they seemed, in the glory of their youth and pride, seated about that table, but sad and tragical, like gods exiled from wide heaven. None spake, and the Queen cast down her eyes, sitting as if wrapped in thought. Then the Lord Jas rose to his feet and said, O Queen Sophonisba, forgive us that our private sorrows should make us so forgetful of our hospitality as weary our guest with a mirthless feast. But think 'tis because we know thee, our dear friend, we use not too much ceremony. Tomorrow we will be merry with thee, whate'er betide thereafter. So they bade good night. But as they went out into the garden under the stars, the Queen took Jas aside privately and said to him, My lord, since thou and my lord Brandoch Daha came first of mortal men into Costrabellon and fulfilled the weird according to preordainment, this only hath been my desire, to further you and to enhance you and to obtain for you what you would, so far as in me lieth. Though I be but a weak maid, yet hath it seemed good to the blessed gods to show kindness unto me. One holy prayer may work things we scarce dare dream of. Wilt thou that I pray to them tonight? Alas, dear Queen, said he, shall those estranged and divided ashes unite again? Who shall turn back the flood tide of unalterable necessity? But she said, Thou hast crystals, and perspectives can show thee things afar off. I pray bring them, and row me in thy boat up to Moomere Head, that we may land there about midnight. And let my lord Brandoch Daha come with us and thy brothers, but let none else know of it, for that were but to mock them with a false dawn, if it should prove at last to be according to thy wisdom, O my lord, and not according to my prayers. So the Lord Jas did according to the word of that fair Queen, and they rowed her up the lake by moonlight. None spake. And the Queen sate apart in the bows of the boat in earnest supplication to the blessed gods. When they were come to the head of the lake, they went ashore on a little spit of silver sand. The April night was above them, mild with moonlight. The shadows of the fells rose inky black, and beyond imagination huge against the sky. The Queen kneeled awhile in silence on the cold ground, and those lords of Demon-land stood together in silence watching her. In a while she raised her eyes to heaven, and behold, between the two main peaks of the scarf, a meteor crept slowly out of darkness and across the night sky, leaving a trail of silver fire, and silently departed into darkness. They watched, and another came, and yet another, until the western sky above the mountain was ablaze with them. From 2 points of heaven they came, one betwixt the 4 claws of the lion, and one in the dark sign of Cancer. And they that came from the lion were sparkling like the white fires of Rigel or Altair, and they that came from the crab were haughty red, like the lustre of Antares. The lords of Demonland, leaning on their swords, watched these portents for a long while in silence. Then the travelling meteors ceased, and the steadfast stars shone lonely and serene. A soft breeze stirred among the alders and willows by the lake. The lapping waters, lapping the shingly shore, made a quiet tune. A nightingale in a coppice on a little hill sang so passionate sweet, it seemed some spirit singing. As in a trance they stood and listened, until that singing ended, and a hush fell on water and wood and lawn. Then all the east blazed up for an instant with sheet lightnings, and thunder growled from the east beyond the sea. The thunder took form so that music was in the heavens, filling earth and sky, as with trumpets calling to battle, first high, then low, then shuddering down to silence. Jus and Brandoch Daha knew it for that great call to battle which had preluded that music in the dark night without her palace in Kostra Belorn, when first they stood before her portal divine. The great call went again through earth and air, sounding defiance, and in its train new voices, groping in darkness, rising to passionate lament, hovering and dying away on the wind, till naught remained but a roll of muffled thunder, long, low, quiet, big with menace. The Queen turned to Lord Jus. Surely her eyes were like two stars shining in the gloom. She said in a drowned voice, "Thy perspectives, my lord." So the Lord Jus made a fire of certain spices and herbs, and smoke rose in a thick cloud full of fiery sparks with a sweet, sharp smell. And he said, "Not we, O my lady, lest our desires cheat our senses, but look thou in my perspectives through the smoke, and say unto us what thou shalt behold in the east beyond the unharvested sea." The Queen looked, and she said, "I behold a harbour town, and a sluggish river coming down to the harbour through a mere set about with mud flats, and a great waste of fen stretching inland from the sea. Inland, by the riverside, I behold a great bluff standing above the fens, and walls about the bluff, as it were a citadel. And the bluff and the walled hold perched thereon are black like old night, and like throned iniquity sitting in the place of power, darkening the desolation of that fen." Just said, "Are the walls thrown down, or is not the great round tower southwestward thrown down in ruin athwart the walls?" She said, "All is whole and sound as the walls of thine own castle, my lord." Just said, "Turn the crystal, O Queen, that thou mayest see within the walls if any persons be therein, and tell us their shape and seeming." The Queen was silent for a space, gazing earnestly in the crystal. Then she said, "I see a banquet hall with walls of dark green jasper speckled with red, and a massy cornice borne up by giants, three-headed carved in black serpentine, and each giant is bowed beneath the weight of a huge crabfish. The hall is seven-sided. 2 long tables there be, and a cross bench. There be iron braziers in the midst of the hall, and flamboys burning in silver stands, and revellers quaffing at the long tables. Some dark young men, black of brow and great of jaw, most soldier-like, brothers mayhap. Another with them, ruddy of countenance and kindlier to look on, with long brown mustachios. Another that weareth a brazen byrnie and sea-green kirtle, an old man. He, with sparse grey whiskers and flabby cheeks, fat and unwieldy, not a comely old man to look upon." She ceased speaking, and just said, "Whom seest thou else in the banquet hall, O Queen?" She said, "The flare of the flamboys hideth the cross bench." I will turn the crystal again. Now I behold 2 diverting themselves with dice at the table before the cross bench. One is well-looking enough, well-knit, of a noble port, with curly brown hair and beard, and keen eyes like a sailor. The other seemeth younger in years, younger than any of you, my lords. He is smooth-shaved, of a fresh complexion and fair curling hair, and his brow is wreathed with a festal garland. A most big, broad, strong, and seemly young man. Yet is there a somewhat maketh me ill at ease beholding him, and for all his fair countenance and royal bearing he seemeth displeasing in mine eyes. There is a damosel there too, watching them while they play. Showily dressed she is, and hath some beauty, yet scarce can I commend her. And, ill at ease on a sudden, the queen suddenly put down the crystal. The eye of Lord Brandoch Daha twinkled, but he kept silence. Lord Dew said, "More, I entreat thee, O Queen, ere the reek be gone and the vision fade. If this be all within the banquet hall, seest thou naught without?" Queen Sophonisba looked again, and in a while said, "There is a terrace facing to the west under the inner wall of that fortress of old night, and walking on it in the torchlight, a man crowned like a king. Very tall he is, lean of body, and long of limb. He weareth a black doublet, bedizened o'er with diamonds, and his crown is in the figure of a crabfish, and the jewels thereof outface the sun in splendor. But scarce may I mark his apparel for looking on the face of him, which is more terrible than the face of any man that ever I saw. And the whole aspect of the man is full of darkness and power and terror and stern command, that spirits from below earth must tremble at and do his bidding." Just said, "Heaven forfend that this should prove but a sweet and golden dream, and we wake tomorrow to find it flown." "There walketh with him," said the queen, in intimate converse, as of a servant talking to his lord, "one with a long black beard, curly as the sheep's wool, and glossy as the raven's wing. Pale he is, as the moon in daylight hours, slender, with fine-cut features and great dark eyes, and his nose hooked like a reaping hook, gentle-looking and melancholy, looking yet noble." Lord Brandoch Daha said, "Seest thou none, O Queen?" "In the lodgings that be in the eastern gallery above the inner court of the palace." The queen answered, "I see a lofty bedchamber hung with arras. It is dark, save for two branching candlesticks of lights burning before a great mirror. I see a lady standing before the mirror, crowned with a queen's crown of purple amethysts on her deep hair that hath the colour of the tipmost tongues of a flame. A man cometh through the door behind her, parting the heavy hangings left and right. A big man he is, and looketh like a king in his great wolfskin mantle and his kirtle of russet velvet with ornaments of gold, his bald head set about with grizzled curls, and his bushy beard flecked with grey. Speak him something past his prime, but the light of youth burns in his eager eyes, and the vigour of youth is in his tread. She turneth to greet him. Tall she is, and young she is, and beautiful, and proud-faced, and sweet-faced, and most gallant-hearted too, and merry of heart too, if her looks belie her not." Queen Sophonisba covered her eyes, saying, "My lords, I see no more. The crystal curdles within like foam in a whirlpool under a high force in rainy weather. Mine eyes grow sore with watching. Let us row back, for the night is far spent, and I am weary." But just stayed her and said, "Let me dream yet a while. The double pillar of the world, that member thereof which we, blind instruments of inscrutable heaven, did shatter, restored again, from this time forth to maintain, I and he, his and mine, ageless and deathless forever. Forever our high contention, whether he or we should be great masters of all the earth? If this be but phantoms, O Queen, thou'st ticed us to the very heart of bitterness. This we could have missed, unseen and unimagined, but not now. Yet how were it possible the gods should relent and the years return? But the queen spake, and her voice was like the falling shades of evening, pulsing with hidden splendor, as of a sense of wakening starlight alive behind the fading blue. This king, she said, in the wickedness of his impious pride, did wear on his thumb the likeness of that Worm Ouroboros, as much as to say his kingdom should never end. Yet was he, when the appointed hour did come, thundered down into the depths of hell. And if now he be raised again, and his days continued, 'tis not for his virtue, but for your sake, my lords, whom the almighty gods do love. Therefore I pray you possess your hearts awhile with humility before the most high gods, and speak no unprofitable words. Let us row back. Dawn came golden-fingered, but the lords of Demonland lay along abed after their watch in the night. About the 3rd hour before noon, the presence was filled in the high presence chamber, and the 3 brethren sat upon their thrones, as 4 years ago they sat, between the golden hippogriffs, and beside them were thrones set for Queen Sophonisba and Lord Brandoch Daha. All else of beauty and splendor in Galing Castle had the queen beheld, but not till now this presence chamber, and much she marvelled at its matchless beauties and rarities, the hangings and the carvings on the walls, the fair pictures, the lamps of moonstone and escarbuncles self-effulgent, the monsters on the 24 pillars, carved in precious stones, so great that 2 men might scarce circle them with their arms, and the constellations burning in that firmament of lapis lazuli below the golden canopy. And when they drank unto Lord Jus the cup of glory to be, wishing him long years and joy and greatness for evermore, the queen took a little cithern, saying, O my lord, I will sing a sonnet to thee and to you, my lords, and to sea-girt Demonland. So saying, she smote the strings and sang in that crystal voice of hers, so true and delicate that all that were in that hall were ravished by its beauty. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of Mai, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines. By chance or nature's changing course untrimmed, but thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou oust, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. When in eternal lines to time thou growst, so long as men can breath or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. When she had done, Lord Jus rose up very nobly and kissed her hand, saying, O Queen Sophonisba, fosterling of the gods, shame us not with praises that be too high for mortal men. For well thou knowest what thing alone might bring us content. And 'tis not to be thought that that which was seen at Moonmere Head last night was very truth indeed, but rather the dream of a night vision. But Queen Sophonisba answered and said, My lord Jus, blaspheme not the bounty of the blessed gods, lest they be angry and withdraw it, who have granted unto you of Demonland from this day forth youth, everlasting and unwaning strength and skill in arms, and— But hark, she said, for a trumpet sounded at the gate, 3 strident blasts. At the sound of that trumpet blown, the lords Goldry and Spitfire sprang from their seats, clapping hand to sword. Lord Jus stood like a stag at gaze. Lord Brandoch Daha sat still in his golden chair, scarce changing his pose of easeful grace, but all his frame seemed alight with action near to birth, as the active principle of light pulses and grows in the sky at sunrise. He looked at the queen, his eyes filled with a wild surmise. A serving man, obedient to Just's nod, hastened from the chamber. No sound was there in that high presence chamber in Galing, till in a minute's space the serving man returned with startled countenance, and, bowing before Lord Just, said, "Lord, it is an ambassador from Witchland and his train. He craveth present audience."